transmissions to the Prophet via isnads. And the earliest book in the Musnad genre is written by someone named Abu Dawud al-Tayalisi, who died in 204 Hijri, or 820 of the Common Era. And this book has survived. So this is a new way to look at this question of how do we understand Islam. Instead of thinking about all the different sources who can tell us about how to live as Muslims, let's just focus on the Prophet, and let's focus on our chains of transmission back to the Prophet. Now, what happens after this is you have a great generation of scholars, people like Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari, who died in 256, 870, his student Muslim bin al-Hajjaj al-Nisapuri, who died in 261, 875, Abu Isa al-Tirmidhi, who died in 279, 892, Abu Dawud al-Sijistani died 275, 888, Ibn Majah died 273, I forgot the Miladi date, and someone like Ahmad bin Shu'ayb al-Nasa'i died 303, 915, coming along and saying, let's basically combine these two genres. Let's say, I want to give people a book that they can go to and look up things topically. When do I need to do wudu? Do I need to do wudu after I've eaten camel meat? Okay, I go to the chapter on wudu. I look at the sub-chapter on hadiths about wudu because of eating camel meat. And I'm going to give them just material from the Prophet. I'm going to give them the most authoritative, surefire method to understand what is right and wrong in Islam by going back to the Prophet. So they basically combine these two genres. They only have hadiths back to the Prophet, but it's organized topically. You can imagine how useful this is. And some of these scholars, specifically al-Bukhari, Muslim, later their student Ibn Khuzaymah, who died 311, 923, the great Shafi scholar of Naysapur in Iran, Ibn Hibban al-Busti, who died at 354, 965, say, okay, we're gonna give you a musannaf with only hadiths back to the Prophet, and in addition, we're going to give you only those hadiths we think are authentic. Only those hadiths we think are authentic. Because you have to remember, early Muslims were very afraid of, a lot of early Muslims were very afraid of getting carried away with all the different religious and cultural traditions around them. You can imagine these Arab Bedouins going into cities like Jerusalem and Damascus, the great Greek cities of the Near East with its philosophical and different religious traditions, and basically being absolutely terrified of their religion becoming completely polluted by all of these ideas. So they didn't want, a lot of early Muslims did not want to allow their reason to carry them away, to start thinking reasonably about what we should do in our religion. To be on the safe side, to stick with the message of God and His Prophet, we're going to rely on only those things that have been transmitted to us from the early community. And in that case, sometimes they would say, this hadith is not necessarily the most reliable hadith. You know, we're not 100% sure the Prophet said this, maybe 60% sure. Suhail can tell us more about that. But it's still better than just going and saying what we think is right based on our own feeble reasoning. We know that we are influenced by all these heresies around us and the world we see around us in the Near East. So they said, even if it's weak, I'm going to take this as evidence. Now, what Bukhari, Muslim, and people who wrote Sahih book says is, no, there are enough authentic hadith out there that you can just use authentic hadith that we know the Prophet said. You don't need to go and use this weaker material. So, in the middle of the 9th century, you have kind of a culmination, in a way, of the legal authenticating process of hadith, where you have these extremely accessible, useful, topically organized books of hadiths back to the Prophet, whose authors have given you what they think is the authentic vision of the Prophet's Sunnah. Now, a lot of people think that this is where hadith ends. Okay, Bukhari's come, we have Sahih al-Bukhari. What's there more to do? Okay, but what most people don't know is that the vast majority of hadith, all those hadiths out there, let's not think about whether they're authentic or not. Just things that people say the Prophet said. The vast majority of hadiths are not really written down in books until after al-Bukhari. People like Abu Qasim Sulaiman al-Tabarani died in 360, 971, or not yet, 971. The great Hadith scholar of Isfahan, Iran. In his massive personal mu'jam, or sort of personal Hadith collection, lists a huge number of Hadiths that are not found anywhere else. Other people in his generation, one scholar named Abu Hassan al-Masarjisi, had a musnad that was so vast it would have taken up 2 to 3 library shelves. Imagine, 2 to 3 library shelves. It's unfortunately lost. Huge collections of hadith. Anything they could find that it was narrated from the Prophet. They didn't care if it was authentic or not. They were just trying to collect everything. Al-Khatib al-Baghdadi, a great scholar of Baghdad, one of the most important hadith scholars in Islamic history, wrote his History of Baghdad, in which he gave you biographies of all those scholars who visited Baghdad and been there. And for each of them, he gives you a hadith that he transmits back to the Prophet through that scholar. And in that book, you find hadiths that don't exist anywhere else. He died in 1073 of the Christian calendar. So, through these local histories, personal hadith collections, and transmission sessions, which is basically a hadith scholar sitting there and reading all his different hadith books to you, everything he has that goes back to the Prophet. You have the continuation of hadith collection long after 200 years, 300 years after the deaths of Bukhari and Muslim. And in fact, it's not really till the 1200s. It's not really till the 1200s with scholars like Abdul Karim al-Rafi'i, who died, I think, in 1226, the common era, in his history of Qazvin, the Iranian city of Qazvin, that you have kind of the end of writing down hadiths. After that, no one can really come up with a new hadith. Now, none of these hadiths are probably authentic, but no one's even going to try and say it's a hadith after that, right? But that's kind of the end of the hadith collection period. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about this, by the way? You feel free to ask questions, incidentally. Just raise your hands or shout out something. Anybody have any questions? Is this clear? Am I being clear? No, boy. No response to that. I don't know if that's good or bad. Okay. What about hadith criticism? We talked about collection. Let's talk about criticism. Okay, now I'm going to ask you guys a question. You have to respond. How would you verify reports? How many of you guys work in an office? Anybody here work in an office? So who else works in an office? Nobody else wants students? Okay, well, I'm going to give an office. Imagine you're working in an office, okay? Your boss invites everybody in your office to a party at his house. And you're going to go, but you stub your toe brutally on the way out of your house. And it hurts so much you actually are immobile and can't go to the party. So you don't go, and on Monday, you're sitting in your office and you walk down the hall to the coffee room, and there's this weird guy in your office who's very odd. He doesn't seem to shower often, and he goes around mumbling that William Shatner calls him at home. He's kind of a real weirdo. He says to you, "Hey, the boss said that he's going to fire you." Yeah, he said it at the party. Bunch of us. He said the boss is going to fire you. What would you think? What would you think? You'd probably be a little confused. This guy's kind of a weirdo. You don't really. He says odd things. So, on the way back to your office, you stop by Jim's desk, and Jim sort of knows all the office gossip. You say, "Hey, Jim, did you hear anything about anybody getting fired or anything?" And Jim says, "No, I haven't heard anything." So you go to your office and you sit down, and then your best friend, Sally, opens the door. Sally's a very solid person. You go to lunch with Sally, and she always gives you great advice. And she always shows up on time for meetings, is careful generally in her life. And she comes to you and says, I was talking with the boss and a few other people, and the boss said that he really likes your work, and he wants to promote you. Right? So you're, wow, that's great news, Sally. I'm really happy to hear this. And Sally says, yeah, I was talking, the boss was talking to me and Jimmy, or me and Taylor. So you go off to Taylor and you say, hey, Taylor, did the boss really say this about me? Did he really say he likes my work and he wants to promote me? And Taylor says, oh, yeah, he said that. We were really surprised at the party when he said that. So does this sound like a realistic situation? Does this sound realistic? Or have I made this up and really gone far astray in this. Anyone here have opinions? Come on.